My name is Claire Donovan. I was 32 years old the day my brother's fist shattered the last illusion that we were ever a family. The church smelled of lilies and rain. My mother's coffin rested beneath a gold cross polished so bright it hurt to look at. I had spent the morning rehearsing the words I would say to her in silence, words of forgiveness she would never hear. My father stood near the altar, rigid in his black suit, his hands clasped like a man who believed control could replace grief. Ryan arrived late, as always, swagger in his shoulders even at a funeral. His tie hung loose, his cologne too strong. When our eyes met across the aisle, there was no sadness, only contempt. He approached during the closing hymn, his whisper cutting through the organ's soft tremor. "You think you fooled everyone, don't you? Coming here like the perfect daughter after abandoning mom in her last months." I felt the sting before the words registered. I hadn't abandoned anyone. I had been the one changing IV bags, spoon-feeding her soup, holding her hand when she couldn't remember my name. But I didn't defend myself. You can't reason with someone who's rewritten the truth to survive his own guilt. The guests began filing out, umbrellas opening against the drizzle outside. Ryan stepped closer, his jaw tight, his voice louder now. "She died thinking you were a selfish brat. Maybe you should have been the one in that box." The words hit harder than the scent of wet roses. I turned to leave. That's when he did it. His fist came out of nowhere, colliding with my mouth so hard I heard the crack before I tasted the blood. I fell backward, the bouquet in my hand, scattering petals across the marble aisle. Someone gasped. Someone else screamed my name. My father didn't move. He only said, "Stop making a scene, Claire. You always provoke him." I pushed myself up dizzy, the metallic taste flooding my throat. Ryan looked down at me, breathing hard, knuckles red. "You deserved it," he said, his voice calm now, almost tender, as if explaining a simple fact. My mother's coffin stood behind him, the white lilies trembling from the vibration of the blow. And in that silence, I saw what I'd been denying for years. This wasn't grief. It was power, the kind that feeds on fear and silence. My lips throbbed blood, dripping onto the black lace hem of my dress. I pressed a tissue against it, watching the stain spread like a warning. Around us, the mourners whispered, torn between shock and obedience to my father's glare. The organ faltered to a stop. The priest cleared his throat, unsure whether to intervene. And then I noticed the small red light above the side altar, the church's livestream camera still on, recording the service for relatives who couldn't attend. The realization steadied me. Ryan's outburst wasn't just seen, it was saved. I rose slowly, meeting his eyes. The satisfaction on his face curdled when he saw the blood smear across my cheek. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I simply turned toward the camera, standing tall beside my mother's coffin, letting it capture the truth my family had buried for decades. The truth that our violence had always worn Sunday clothes. Outside, thunder rolled over Portland, heavy and distant. The guests began to scatter, pretending nothing had happened. My father muttered something about grief making people act irrationally. Ryan wiped his hand with a handkerchief, avoiding my gaze. The world returned to its polite rhythm, but something inside me had snapped cleanly, decisively. I walked down the aisle, heels clicking against the stone, each step measured. As I passed my father, he said under his breath, "Don't do anything stupid. You'll regret it." I stopped, looked him in the eye, and said softly, "Maybe it's time he regrets something." Outside, the rain was colder than I expected. It stung the cut on my lip and washed the blood down my chin. I lifted my face to it, breathing deep, the air sharp and metallic like resolve. Ryan's laughter echoed from inside the church, low and confident, the sound of someone who believed consequences were for other people. I kept walking until the sound faded behind me. In that moment, I knew grief was no longer my burden to carry. Justice was. I used to believe families could heal if you loved them hard enough. That was before I learned that some people mistake love for permission. When we were kids, Ryan was the golden son. Even the way our father said his name sounded heavier, like it carried pride. Ryan was tall, athletic, good-looking in a clean magazine way. I was the quiet one with ink-stained fingers and crooked bangs, forever told to help, to understand, to forgive. Our mother Evelyn tried to balance us, but she was gentle to the point of surrender. Dad made the rules, Ryan broke them, and somehow I always paid for it. At 12, he smashed a neighbor's car window with a baseball. Dad made me walk next door to apologize and hand over my allowance. "You're better with words," he said. That pattern never changed. When Ryan flunked out of college, Dad blamed the system. When I earned my degree in education, he said teaching isn't a real career. Ryan opened a construction company at 26 funded by family loans, and for a while, everyone bragged about him at Thanksgiving. "Our boy builds dreams," Mom would say, ignoring that those dreams were built on unpaid bills. I lent him $30,000 from my divorce settlement because he said he needed bridge money to secure a government contract. He called me every day for a week until I caved. When I asked about repayment 6 months later, he laughed. "Family doesn't keep score, Claire." It was the same phrase our father used when Ryan crashed his second truck. That was when I learned how power sounds. It's smooth, guilt-wrapped, impossible to argue with. Mom tried to stay out of it, but when her health began to fail first, the migraines, then the memory lapses, it was me who moved back home. Ryan visited once a week, stayed 10 minutes, kissed her forehead like a celebrity signing autographs. The nurses adored him. He knew exactly when to show up for attention. I stayed through the long nights monitoring the oxygen machine, listening to her whisper names from the past. She never called for Ryan, not once. She called for me for the cat we buried when I was 9, for the songs she used to hum while folding laundry. Sometimes she forgot where she was, looked at me, and asked, "Did Ryan make it home safe?" I always said yes because I didn't have the heart to tell her he was out drinking or shouting at creditors. 2 months before she died, Ryan came to the house with legal papers and said Mom wanted to update her will. I asked what for. He said something about simplifying distribution. He told her to sign while she was half asleep. I stopped him, told him she wasn't lucid enough, and he stormed out calling me controlling. The next morning he texted, "You just cost the family peace." Congratulations. That was the last time I saw him until the funeral. When Mom passed, I handled the arrangements. I chose the lilies she loved, the soft hymns, the pastor who'd known her for decades. Ryan sent one text, "Let me handle the eulogy. I'm her son." I didn't answer. He showed up late that day wearing the same smirk he used to wear in court whenever Dad bailed him out of a speeding ticket. As the service began, I kept thinking about how Mom used to whisper that Ryan reminded her of Dad when he was young. Charming, reckless, always forgiven. I wondered if she saw that as a blessing or a warning. When the coffin lowered, I remembered something she told me a week before her mind slipped completely. "Don't let him rewrite me after I'm gone." At the time, I thought she meant her obituary. Now I know she meant everything. Ryan's violence at the funeral wasn't born that day. It was decades in the making. Every time Dad said boys will be boys, every time Mom said he doesn't mean it, they handed him another excuse, another layer of armor. I grew up apologizing for things I didn't do, learning that silence kept the peace. But peace built on fear is just a longer war. After the punch, while the bruise on my lip darkened into purple, I replayed every moment that led to it, the allowances paid for his mistakes, the loans disguised as love, the manipulation wrapped in brotherly smiles. I saw how every small surrender led to that single moment on the church floor. My father's calm voice after the hit wasn't shock, it was continuity. He was keeping order, the only kind of order he'd ever known Ryan on top me beneath. It took blood to make me see it clearly. That afternoon, after the mourners left, I stood by my mother's grave and whispered, "I kept your promise, Mom. He won't rewrite you again." The wind picked up carrying the scent of rain and lilies, and for the first time, I didn't feel small beneath his shadow. I felt ready. The kind of ready that doesn't forgive, only exposes. The kind of ready that waits for justice. The day after the funeral, my lip had swollen to the size of a plum. I could barely eat, but when I looked in the mirror, the bruise was less ugly than the quiet that followed. No one called to ask if I was okay. Not my father. Not the relatives who saw it happen. The entire family group chat went silent like a crime scene scrubbed clean. I scrolled through photos of the service online. Someone had posted the live stream link on Facebook. The video had already been taken down, marked unavailable. Ryan's doing, I knew it. He had connections everywhere in town, from the police station to the church council. By evening, a text arrived from my father. "Don't make this bigger than it is. Grief makes people do strange things." I typed a reply and deleted it. There was no sentence that could explain the rage in me without sounding hysterical. Ryan messaged an hour later. "You talk to cops, I'll show them the will. The real one." He attached a photo of our mother's signature shaky uneven dated 3 weeks before she died. Forged. My stomach turned. He wasn't just violent, he was erasing her 1 page at a time. I remembered the papers he'd tried to push in front of her when she was half conscious. He must have scanned them later, manipulating them to look valid. Dad would sign anything if Ryan asked. He always had. That night, I sat in the dark living room surrounded by sympathy cards and uneaten casseroles from neighbors. The air smelled of lilies and bleach. The bruise on my mouth throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I turned on my laptop searching for law offices in Portland that handled family disputes. I didn't hit send. Instead, I stared at the photo of Mom on my desktop, smiling in her garden dirt under her nails, the kind of woman who apologized for flowers dying in winter. She deserved better than this legacy of fear. The next morning, I drove to my father's house. He opened the door, still in pajamas, newspaper in one hand, coffee in the other. "You can't just show up," he said. "Your brother's resting." "Resting," I repeated. "He hit me in front of 50 people. He sighed like a man inconvenienced by weather. "You provoked him. You always push too far, Claire. You know how he gets." The sentence was so practiced it sounded rehearsed. I laughed short and sharp. "You sound like you're reading from his script." He frowned. "I'm reading from experience." My mother's wheelchair still sat in the corner untouched. I ran my fingers over the handle, cold metal slick with dust. "She wouldn't want this," I said. "Your mother would want peace. She'd want truth." He looked away. "Truth doesn't keep families together." "Neither does denial," I whispered. He muttered something about me ruining everything and shut the door in my face. I stood on the porch until my hands went numb. The next week passed in fog. I went back to teaching but avoided the staff lounge. Kids stared at my bruise. Parents sent polite emails about whether I was okay. I told them I'd had a fall. It was easier than the truth. Late one night while grading essays, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. A single line, "Stop before you lose more than a tooth." My chest tightened. I called the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I opened my email, drafted a note to a lawyer named Alan Harris, Mom's former estate advisor. I wrote, "We need to talk about Evelyn Donovan's will, and about Ryan." I hesitated before pressing send, remembering how Dad once told me lawyers make enemies out of family. I hit send anyway. The next morning, Alan replied within an hour. He wrote, "Come by my office. Bring anything you have." I went. He was older now, gray at the temples, but still precise in his words. When I told him about the punch, the forged will, the threats, he listened without interrupting. Finally, he said, "Your mother kept meticulous records. If something's wrong, there's proof." He handed me a small brass key labeled ED. "She left this with me years ago. Safety deposit box. Maybe she wanted you to find it." The metal was warm from his hand when I closed my fingers around it. Proof. The word felt heavier than grief. That night, I tucked the key into my palm under the lamp's dim glow and whispered to the empty house, "You wanted peace, Mom. I'll start with the truth." The week after meeting Alan Harris was the first time I realized how deep Ryan's manipulation ran. By Monday morning, half the teachers at my school were whispering. I found out why when the principal called me in. "Claire," he said gently, "someone sent an anonymous email suggesting you're emotionally unstable and might be unfit for the classroom after your mother's passing." I stared at him, my pulse climbing. "Did it mention who?" He shook his head. "No name, but it included a link to a video." He hesitated. "From the funeral." The clip showed the instant his fist met my face, then my father's voice saying I'd provoked it. The email claimed it was a mutual altercation between siblings. My throat went dry. "It's not mutual when you're bleeding on marble." The principal sighed. "I believe you, Claire, but the district will need documentation in case it escalates." I walked out trembling, realizing Ryan had already started rewriting the story. Gaslighting wasn't just private, it was public now. That night, my father left a voicemail. "Your brother's embarrassed Claire. You should take that video down. People are talking." I played it twice, then deleted it. He wasn't asking for peace. He was issuing orders. The next day, Ryan posted photos on social media of himself volunteering at a community shelter captioned, "Trying to make Mom proud." Dozens of comments poured in. "So sorry for your loss. You're such a strong son." I scrolled through them until the nausea made me shut my phone off. The narrative had shifted. I was the bitter sister. He was the grieving saint. I didn't fight back online. Instead, I focused on the key Alan had given me. On Thursday, I went to the downtown bank. The clerk led me to a private room and set a small metal box on the table. Inside lay a flash drive, 2 envelopes, and a note in Mom's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to say everything. Ryan will try to control the story. Don't let him." My hands shook as I plugged the drive into my laptop at home. The video was simple. Mom sitting in her chair, oxygen tube in place, eyes watery but lucid. "If Ryan tells you he's managing things, don't believe him. He's been trying to take control of my finances for months. Claire, you're the only one I trust to keep him honest. Please, protect the truth." I watched it twice, my tears mixing with disbelief. She knew. She'd known for a long time. The first envelope held her original will signed "Notarized Equal Distribution" between Ryan and me. The second envelope contained bank statements and handwritten notes about withdrawals Ryan had made under medical reimbursements. He'd stolen from her while pretending to manage her care. My stomach clenched fury blooming under my ribs. He wasn't just violent, he was a thief. I called Alan and told him everything. He said, "Make copies, store one off-site, we'll file injunctions if necessary." That night, the shadows in my house felt longer. Around 11 p.m., someone knocked on the door, 3 slow thuds. I froze. The knock came again louder. I crept to the window, pulled the curtain an inch. A black truck idled in the driveway. Ryan's silhouette stood on the porch, swaying slightly, a beer bottle glinting in his hand. I grabbed my phone, opened the Ring app, and started recording. His voice slurred through the wood. "You think you're smart, huh? Playing detective? You have no idea what you're dealing with." He kicked the step hard enough to rattle the glass. "Withdraw your police crap or I'll make sure no one believes a word you say." I whispered to 911. One giving the address. The operator's voice stayed calm. "Units are on the way. Stay inside." Red and blue lights flickered across my walls minutes later. When the officers pulled him off the porch, he shouted my name like a curse. "You ruined this family." I didn't answer. I just held my phone higher so they'd see the recording. The next morning, my father was at the police station posting bail. Ryan walked out, smirking bandage on his hand where he'd hit the door. He sent me a message later. "You think the law scares me? You're still my sister. That means you belong to this family." I stared at the screen, the words crawling like insects. Belong. That was the lie they'd fed me my whole life, that belonging required obedience, that silence was loyalty. I typed back, "Not anymore." Then I blocked his number. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from the clarity of it. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the Ring camera recharging. Proof. I had proof. Proof of the punch, proof of the threats, proof of the will. For the first time in years, I felt control shift toward me. It was small, fragile, but real. I saved all the files to a hidden drive labeled "Simply Truth." The morning after Ryan's arrest, Portland felt washed clean by rain. I sat at my kitchen table with Mom's flash drive beside a cup of untouched coffee, the light blinking faintly like a heartbeat. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face from that video, her soft voice saying, "Please, protect the truth." It didn't sound like a request anymore. It was an inheritance. I called Alan Harris at 9 sharp and told him what I'd found. He told me to bring everything, the will, the flash drive, the bank statements, to his office. When I arrived, his assistant guided me into a small conference room that smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. Alan adjusted his glasses, eyes narrowing as he flipped through the documents. Your mother was thorough, he murmured. She suspected something. He inserted the flash drive into his computer and watched the recording in silence. When it ended, he turned to me. This is substantial, Claire. Between this and the funeral footage, you have more than enough to open a civil and criminal case. The words hit harder than I expected. A case meant exposure, headlines, neighbors whispering, but it also meant truth. Do it, I said. File whatever you need to. He nodded. I'll contact the county clerk for verification of her original will and submit a preservation order for your brother's forged version. Once we have those authenticated, we can proceed. I drove home through gray drizzle, every stoplight reflecting off wet asphalt like fragments of memory. When I pulled into the driveway, a single white envelope was taped to my door. My name, handwritten no return address. Inside was a photograph of me at the funeral on my knees after the punch, blood on my lip. On the back, someone had written, "Keep digging and you'll join her sooner than you think." My hand trembled so hard I nearly dropped it. I closed the blinds, locked the doors, then emailed Detective Keller, the officer who'd handled Ryan's assault report. I attached the photo and ring footage. Her reply came within an hour. "We'll increase patrol in your area. Don't respond to threats. Document everything." That night, I sat on the couch watching the shadows move across the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. I thought about all the years I'd defended Ryan to my friends. He's just under stress, I'd say. He's trying his best. I wondered how many women had said the same about their abusers. The next afternoon, Alan called. "The county confirmed your mother's will," he said. "The version Ryan filed is indeed forged. We're proceeding with a fraud complaint." My chest loosened for the first time in days. Proof. I had always been told that family meant trust, but in that moment, proof felt safer than love. 2 days later, Detective Keller visited my house. She was mid-40s calm, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "Your brother's pattern fits coercive control," she said. "He manipulates, isolates, then uses physical violence when his authority is challenged." She asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I shook my head. "I'm not running," I said. "He's the one who should be scared now." She smiled faintly. "That's the spirit, but be cautious. Men like him don't surrender power easily." When she left, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the documents, the flash drive, the copies Alan had made. I realized the weight of what I held. It wasn't just paper. It was the history of a family built on silence and rewritten lies. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're turning Mom's death into a circus." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the funeral video again. I slowed the frame to the exact moment his fist hit my face. Behind him, my father's expression wasn't shock. It was irritation, like he'd seen it all before. That image burned into me more deeply than the punch itself. That was the moment I decided this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ending the story. The next morning, Alan filed the motion. The court date came through within days. State of Oregon versus Ryan Donovan, charges of assault fraud and will tampering. I printed the notice and pinned it to the fridge. The sound of the magnet clicking into place felt final. I texted Detective Keller one sentence. "He's going to see what proof looks like." The night before the court hearing, the house felt too quiet, like silence was holding its breath. I sat grading papers at the kitchen table, red pen tapping absently against the margin of a student essay about justice. The irony wasn't lost on me. Outside, wind whipped against the siding. The clock hit midnight. That's when the first knock came, slow, heavy, deliberate. My stomach turned to ice. I froze, listening. Another knock. 3 precise thuds. I walked to the hallway, careful not to make a sound. Through the frosted glass, I could see the outline of a man, broad shoulders, slightly swaying. I didn't need to guess. My heart recognized him before my mind did. Ryan. I grabbed my phone and whispered to the Ring app, hitting record. His voice cut through the door, slurred but sharp. "Open up, Claire. Let's talk. Family to family?" I stayed silent, my back pressed against the wall. "You've been busy, haven't you? Running to lawyers, cops." "You think you're clever?" He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You always thought you were better than me. Mom's little saint. Guess what? She's not here to save you now. His hand hit the door with a crack that made me flinch. "You ruined everything, you hear me?" "Everything," I whispered to 911. Voice shaking. "My brother's outside my house intoxicated, threatening me. He's on probation for assault." The dispatcher's tone turned professional. "Stay inside, ma'am. Units are 3 minutes out." Ryan kept talking, pacing voice rising. "You think that judge will believe you? You think they care about some live stream glitch? You're nothing without me. You've always been nothing." His words came out broken fragments of fury wrapped in beer and delusion. I looked down at my hands, still shaking, but steady enough to hit record on my phone, capturing every word. A louder bang. The frame rattled. "Come on, Claire. You wanted a show? Here I am." His shadow moved closer to the window, his face catching a sliver of porch light, eyes wild, jaw twitching. The same smirk from the funeral, but cracked open by madness. Tires screeched outside, blue and red lights splashed across the walls. Ryan turned confused, blinking into the sirens. Officers shouted commands, hands visible. "Step back from the door." He hesitated, then lifted the beer bottle like a weapon. The cops moved fast, shouts, the sound of cuffs clicking, the bottle rolling down the porch step. When the doorbell camera caught his final words, they were almost a whisper. "You think this is over." The next morning, Detective Keller called. "He's in custody for the night. We'll extend the restraining order first thing." I thanked her, though my voice felt detached, like I was speaking from underwater. After she hung up, I replayed the footage, Ryan's drunken rage, the cops leading him away. Proof layered upon proof. But what hit hardest wasn't the violence. It was the familiarity of it, the rhythm of his voice, the threats dressed as concern, the echoes of our father's tone. It was the soundtrack of my childhood, only louder now. By noon, Dad was at my door. He looked smaller. Shoulders slumped, but the authority was still there. "They overreacted," he said, stepping inside without waiting. He just wanted to talk. I blocked his path. He threatened to break down my door. "He's grieving," Dad said. "We all are. You're turning this into a war." I laughed bitterly. "No, Dad. I'm ending one." He looked at me, eyes full of disbelief. "You'd put your own brother in jail." He put himself there. His jaw tightened. "You've always twisted things to play the victim." The words hit me like déjà vu. Gaslighting perfectly rehearsed. I didn't answer. I handed him the photo from the night before, the one Ryan taped to my door with the threat written on the back. "Tell me, does that look like grief to you?" He stared at it, color draining from his face. I could almost see the battle inside him, loyalty versus truth. He folded the photo slowly, pocketed it, and walked out without another word. When the door shut, the air felt lighter. That evening, Keller called again. "Claire, the hearing's set for Friday. Protective detail will be present." I thanked her, looked around my living room, and realized something strange. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of Ryan, not of the whispers, not even of being alone. The fear had burned itself out, leaving only steel behind. I walked to the window and looked out at the porch where he'd stood. The bottle was gone. The stain of spilled beer remained a dark ring like an echo. I whispered to it, "You wanted a show. Now you'll get one in court." Friday morning dawned gray and brittle, the kind of Portland sky that looked carved from steel. I wore a black blazer that still smelled faintly of dry cleaning fluid and the weight of resolve. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited, local reporters sniffing for tragedy with a headline. Donovan family scandal was already trending. I took a deep breath before stepping inside. The marble floors gleamed cold beneath the fluorescent lights. Alan Harris met me near the security gate, a thick folder in his hands. "This," he said, patting it, "is your freedom." Inside were the pieces of my life turned into evidence, photographs, printouts, transcripts, all the things my family said didn't exist. Proof tangible and heavy. He led me to the hearing room where Detective Keller waited, nodding in quiet solidarity. Ryan sat across the table in a suit that didn't fit quite right, his hair slicked back, his expression somewhere between pity and hate. My father was beside him, jaw-tight, eyes fixed on the floor. When the judge entered, the shuffle of movement felt like a storm forming. The bailiff called out the case, State of Oregon versus Ryan Donovan. Assault, intimidation, and forgery. I watched Ryan's smirk return as he leaned toward his lawyer. "She's exaggerating," he muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "Always has." My pulse spiked, but I said nothing. Alan rose. "Your Honor, my client brings forward substantial evidence that the defendant not only assaulted her at their mother's funeral, but also attempted to alter the legal will for personal gain. We submit the following exhibits." He opened the folder, laying out each piece like a deck of truth. Exhibit A, the church live stream. Ryan's fist in motion, my body collapsing my father's indifference. The room went silent. Exhibit B, the ring footage, Ryan pounding on my door, slurring threats. Exhibit C, the notarized will and the forged copy signatures misaligned, timestamps altered. Finally, Exhibit D, the flash drive. Alan inserted it into the court's display monitor. My mother's face filled the screen, frail but unmistakably lucid. "If Ryan tells you he's managing things, don't believe him," she said, voice trembling but clear. "Claire is the only one who's ever protected me." A murmur swept through the room. Ryan's lawyer objected, calling it hearsay from a dying woman. The judge overruled. "Proceed." Ryan's hands fidgeted on the table. I saw the first crack in his confidence. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Donovan, do you have anything to say about this video?" He straightened, forcing calm. "She's confused." "My sister manipulated her. I was just trying to keep the family stable." Alan stood again. "Stable, Your Honor. Let the record show that the defendant's version of stability includes physical assault, theft, and intimidation. My client's only crime was surviving it." My father rose suddenly. "Enough," he barked. "You're tearing this family apart." The judge's gavel struck. "Sir, sit down or you'll be removed." The outburst hung in the air like smoke. I looked at him, the man who taught me silence, and felt nothing but distance. Ryan's voice dropped to a snarl. "You did this. You killed her with stress, and now you're trying to kill me too." I met his eyes. "You did that all by yourself." For a long moment no one moved. The judge flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Donovan, the evidence against you is overwhelming. The forged signature alone carries criminal weight." Ryan's shoulders sagged, but then he smiled again, small defiant. "You think you've won because you embarrassed me in public? You don't know what family means." I leaned forward. "Family means accountability." Alan placed a final sheet on the table, a record of Ryan's financial withdrawals from Mom's account labeled medical supplies, each matching the dates he'd gone on vacations to Palm Springs and Seattle. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "This court finds probable cause for all charges. Trial will proceed to sentencing." The gavel struck once more. The sound echoed like closure. As the bailiff led Ryan out, his eyes met mine. The smirk was gone. In its place was something smaller, fear, or maybe the beginning of understanding. My father turned to me, face pale. "You've ruined him." "No," I said quietly. "He ruined himself. I just stopped covering for him." I walked out into the damp afternoon, reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. Keller caught up with me on the steps. "You did good, Claire," she said. "You stayed composed. That matters." I nodded, though my body felt hollow. "It doesn't feel like winning yet." "It will," she said. "Justice is slow, but it's steady." I looked down at the folder still in my hand, edges softened from fingerprints. Inside it were the truths I'd once been told to bury. Now they were public record. For the first time, I wasn't the secret keeper. I was the witness. The trial began on a Monday that smelled of rain and disinfectant. Portland's courthouse always carried that scent, wet coats, polished marble, and nerves. By the time I took my seat behind the witness table, I could feel the collective breath of the gallery pressing against my back. Reporters filled the rear benches, pens ready. A camera from the local news station flickered red before being switched off at the judge's command. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was public reckoning. Ryan entered wearing a navy suit that hung too loose, as if the weight he'd once carried in arrogance had started to evaporate. He didn't look at me. My father sat 2 rows behind him, pale, his hands gripping his cane so tightly his knuckles blanched white. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, studied us like we were strangers trapped in the same photograph. The bailiff called for silence. State of Oregon versus Ryan Donovan, the clerk read. Charges aggravated assault, fraud, forgery, and witness intimidation. The judge, a woman in her 60s with iron gray hair and calm eyes, nodded to the prosecution. Proceed. The prosecutor, a sharp young man named Ellis, stood. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about betrayal. It's about what happens when trust becomes a weapon. He gestured toward me. The defendant struck his sister at their mother's funeral, attempted to falsify a legal will, and threatened her life when she sought justice. Today, you will see the evidence. You will hear the truth. His voice was steady, surgical. Ryan's lawyer countered with the predictable grief misunderstanding of family tragedy turned into spectacle. I'd expected it. What I didn't expect was how calm I felt as the first exhibit played on the screen, the church live stream. The moment his fist hit my face, a collective gasp rippled through the room. Even after watching it 100 times alone, seeing it there on the giant monitor still made my chest tighten. The sound of impact echoed faintly, followed by my father's voice saying, "Stop making a scene." In the silence that followed, I saw one juror's eyes widen, another shake her head. Ryan stared at the table, jaw clenched. Exhibit 2, the Ring doorbell video. Ryan pounding on my door, shouting obscenities, threatening me. The grainy footage captured everything. The slurred voice, the bottle the moment police lights flooded the porch. The prosecutor paused it at the frame where Ryan shouted, "You think this is over?" Ellis turned to the jury. He was right about one thing. It wasn't over until today. Next came the financial evidence, the two wills projected side by side, the real one and the forgery. The differences were small, but damning the fake signature shakier, the notary stamp altered. Ellis pointed with a laser pen. "This, ladies and gentlemen, is not grief. It's premeditated deception." Ryan's lawyer objected, but the judge waved him off. Overruled. Then came the final exhibit, my mother's video. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as her face appeared on the screen, frail oxygen tubing, visible eyes, glassy yet clear. Her voice filled the room, soft but unwavering. "If Ryan tells you he's managing things, don't believe him. Claire is the only one who's ever protected me." The words landed heavier than any blow. I heard someone in the gallery sniff quietly, the shuffle of tissue against skin. Even the judge's eyes softened. Ryan's expression crumbled for a moment, the smirk slipping into something raw anger or grief or both. When the lights came back on, the room felt smaller, like the truth had pushed the walls inward. Ellis stepped aside. "Your witness." Ryan's lawyer rose, smoothing his tie. "Ms. Donovan," he began, "is it possible your brother's behavior that day stemmed from grief? People act irrationally during loss." "Grief doesn't forge signatures," I said. "Grief doesn't send threats at midnight." He shifted. "But you provoked him, didn't you? You confronted him about finances." I kept my voice even. "I confronted him about our mother's will. Because he lied." The lawyer smiled faintly. "You seem quite composed for someone claiming trauma." I leaned forward. "Composure isn't absence of pain. It's control of it. Something my brother never learned." A murmur rippled through the jury box. The lawyer hesitated, then waved off. No further questions. When I stepped down, my knees trembled, but not from fear, from release. Years of silence unwound with every step back to my seat. Ryan was called next. He swaggered up, tried for remorse. "I was grieving," he said, voice cracking in practiced intervals. "Mom's death hit me hard. I lost control for a second. Claire knows I didn't mean it." Ellis stood. "Did you forge your mother's will?" "No." "Did you send your sister threatening messages?" "I was drunk." "I didn't mean them." "Did you hit her?" Ryan hesitated. She provoked me." Ellis smiled coldly. "So, yes." Ryan's face reddened. "I didn't mean yes or no, Mr. Donovan." "Yes." The word hung in the air, irreversible. Ellis nodded. "Thank you for your honesty." He turned to the jury. "Intent doesn't erase impact. You heard him. You saw him. You decide." When closing arguments ended, the judge dismissed us for deliberation. I sat in the hallway staring at the rain streaking down the courthouse windows. Hours passed like years. When the bailiff finally called us back, the jury filed in, faces unreadable. The forewoman stood. "We find the defendant, Ryan Donovan, guilty on all counts." My breath caught. The room exhaled as one. Ryan's shoulders slumped, his mouth open but wordless. My father covered his face with his hands. The judge nodded solemnly. Sentencing will be tomorrow. Court adjourned. The gavel struck once, final and clear. Outside, reporters surged forward, microphones flashing. Someone shouted, "Claire." "How do you feel?" I answered without stopping. Relieved. Because for the first time, the truth didn't need my defense. It stood on its own. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the courthouse windows in long, pale ribbons, the kind of light that pretends to be gentle but exposes everything. My palms were cold as I sat in the front row, waiting for the judge to return. Ryan sat a few feet away, cuffed at the wrists. His suit jacket hung open, wrinkled, a faint bruise still blooming along his jawline from the night police had dragged him off my porch. For the first time in years, he looked small, not harmless, just human. When Judge Simmons entered the room, Rose. Her voice carried the calm precision of someone who had seen too many families self-destruct under the same roof. "Mr. Donovan," she began, "you stand convicted of aggravated assault, fraud, forgery, and intimidation. Before sentencing, the court will hear statements from the victim." Alan nudged me gently. I stood. Every eye followed me as I walked to the podium. My reflection glimmered faintly in the polished wood, the faint scar on my lip, the steadiness in my shoulders. "Your Honor, I said I didn't come here for revenge. I came because silence was killing me. For years, I was told that family means forgiveness no matter the cost. But forgiveness without accountability is just permission for cruelty to continue. My brother didn't just hit me at our mother's funeral. He hid every truth she tried to leave behind. He stole from her, lied to our father, and tried to convince the world I was unstable. He's not sorry for what he did. He's sorry he got caught." The courtroom was silent except for the faint scratch of the stenographer's keys. "I don't want him to suffer," I said finally. "I just want peace, the kind that doesn't require pretending anymore." I stepped back. Judge Simmons nodded, her expression unreadable. She turned to Ryan. "Do you wish to speak before sentencing?" He hesitated, glancing at the rows of spectators, the flash of reporters' notebooks. Then his jaw set. "She ruined my life," he said. "She turned everyone against me. I was trying to keep the family together. She's twisted everything." His words fell flat, echoing against the marble like an old script no one believed anymore. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Donovan, what you call keeping the family together was in truth a pattern of control and violence. This court doesn't tolerate intimidation disguised as grief." She lifted the file, flipping to the final page. "For aggravated assault and intimidation, 12 months county jail and 3 years probation. For fraud and forgery, restitution in the amount of $85,000 to the estate of Evelyn Donovan, payable to the co-beneficiary, Ms. Claire Donovan." The gavel fell once. Ryan blinked as if the sentence hadn't translated. "You can't do that," he said weakly. "She's my sister." "Exactly," Judge Simmons replied. "You should have acted like it." The bailiff moved forward, guiding him toward the exit. Ryan turned eyes wild now. "You think you've won," he shouted. "You destroyed everything Mom built." I stood slowly. "No," I said. "You did that the day you decided her love was something you could counterfeit." His mouth opened to speak again, but the bailiff's hand pressed him forward. The door shut behind him with a metallic echo that seemed to vibrate through the floor. The sound was both ending and release. My father sat frozen 2 rows back, his expression hollow. When the courtroom emptied, he approached the cane, tapping softly. "You could have handled this privately," he said. "You didn't have to humiliate him." I looked at him, the man who'd spent a lifetime protecting Ryan from consequence. "You think this is humiliation, this is accountability. You taught us both that consequences were optional. I just unlearned it." His mouth tightened. "You've destroyed what's left of this family." I met his gaze evenly. Then maybe it was never worth saving. He turned away, his shoulders stooped, disappearing down the hall. Alan touched my arm. "You did well, Claire." "It doesn't feel like winning," I said. "It's not supposed to," he replied. "It's supposed to feel like truth." As we stepped outside, the air smelled of damp earth and exhaust. Reporters waited again, microphones raised. I ignored them. The rain had stopped, leaving a faint shimmer on the courthouse steps. For the first time in years, I could breathe without flinching. Justice, I realized, wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a door closing behind someone who would never come back. News travels fast when it smells like scandal. Within 48 hours, every local outlet had plastered the headline across their sites: "Brother sentenced for assaulting sister at mother's funeral forgery and fraud exposed." My inbox filled with messages from people I didn't know: former students, distant cousins, women who wrote things like, "I wish I'd had your courage." The comments online were a split universe, half praise, half venom. Family should stay private, some said. Others called me brave. I didn't reply to any of them. I'd spent my whole life replying. Now, silence felt like control. Ryan's mugshot appeared on the evening news, his eyes bleary, the arrogance stripped away. The anchor's voice read the charges in the same tone they used for weather alerts. 12 months county jail, 3 years probation, restitution ordered. Just facts. My father refused to speak to reporters but issued a short statement to one paper. "My daughter's actions have divided this family." I read it once and set it down. The division had existed for decades. It had just gone public. At school, my colleagues were kind but cautious, their smiles carrying a trace of curiosity. The principal stopped by my classroom one afternoon. "Claire," he said softly, "take as much time as you need." "Teaching keeps me steady," I replied. "I'll be fine." And for the most part, I was, until the letters began. The first arrived a week later, handwritten smudged with jailhouse ink. "You got what you wanted," Ryan wrote. "Hope you're proud. Tell Dad to stop sending me money. I know you told him to cut me off." I didn't respond. The second letter came 2 weeks later. "You'll regret this when you're old and alone. No one forgives a traitor." I folded it carefully, placed it in a box labeled "Evidence," and went on with my day. The world around me moved as if nothing monumental had happened, but small cracks appeared everywhere. My father's construction business, once co-signed with Ryan, collapsed under investigation for financial discrepancies. He lost 3 contracts in a month. Neighbors whispered about the Donovan case crossing the street when I walked past. The same people who'd sent casseroles after Mom's death now closed blinds when I drove by. That's how small towns handle truth. They pretend it's contagious. One afternoon, Alan called. "Your brother's lawyer filed an appeal," he said. My chest tightened. "Can he?" "He can try," Alan said, "but with the evidence it won't stick. He's grasping at air." I thanked him and hung up, staring at the rain streaking down my window. Even behind bars, Ryan still managed to take up space in my mind. That night, Detective Keller stopped by. "You should know," she said, setting a file on my counter. "Ryan's facing disciplinary issues in county. Started a fight in the rec yard. He'll likely lose good behavior credit." I nodded slowly. "He's never been good at control." Keller studied me for a moment. "You okay?" "Better," I said. "But sometimes I wonder if peace has to feel so empty." She smiled faintly. "Empty can be the start of peace, too." 2 weeks later, a local paper ran an editorial titled "Courage in the Courtroom." It quoted my testimony, called it a watershed moment for victims of familial abuse. The piece went viral. Strangers sent donations to women's shelters in my name. The principal invited me to speak at the district's annual education conference about resilience and advocacy. I hesitated, but Keller encouraged me. "Use the noise," she said. "Turn it into something good." On stage that spring, under the soft hum of the auditorium lights, I looked out at hundreds of teachers, parents, and counselors. "Trauma doesn't end when the sentence is read," I told them. "It ends when the silence does." They stood and applauded. I didn't cry. I felt something better, validation that didn't depend on blood. Meanwhile, the ripples kept spreading. Ryan's wife filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable violence. His bank accounts were frozen to satisfy restitution. My father sold the old house to cover legal fees. The last time I saw him, he stood outside the courthouse steps, staring at the street. "You happy now?" he asked. I looked at him, at the man who'd taught me that silence was love. "No," I said quietly, "but I'm free." He didn't follow me when I walked away. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. Across the street, porch lights flickered on one by one. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Peace didn't come as a wave, it came as a whisper, soft and steady. You survived. You told the truth. Now breathe. Spring melted into early summer, and the world began to soften again. The courthouse headlines faded, the gossip quieted, and life resumed its slow rhythm. I started planting a garden in the backyard. Nothing ambitious. Just rosemary, lavender, and marigolds. The scent of wet soil on my hands was therapy, a reminder that something could grow from the same ground that once felt poisoned. Every Saturday morning I'd kneel in the dirt with my coffee cooling beside me, letting the sound of birds drown out the old echoes. Ryan's letters stopped coming. At first, I kept checking the mailbox, half expecting another venomous paragraph about loyalty and betrayal. But silence replaced his handwriting, and silence, I discovered, could be a blessing. A few times, the county victim advocate emailed updates about his incarceration. "He's compliant now," she wrote. "Working in the laundry wing. Keeps to himself." I didn't reply. It didn't matter. Whether he found peace or bitterness was no longer my responsibility. One Sunday afternoon, I visited Mom's grave for the first time since the sentencing. The lilies I'd planted months earlier had bloomed pale white against the gray stone. I knelt, brushing away stray leaves. "It's done, Mom," I whispered. "The truth's out." The breeze picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain and lilac from the nearby churchyard. I closed my eyes, hearing her voice as it had been on the recording, fragile, loving, but clear. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by it. I was guided. On the way back to my car, I saw an older woman standing by another grave, her hands trembling as she placed flowers. She caught my eye and nodded, the quiet recognition of two people who'd loved and lost in complicated ways. Back home, I pored over old boxes from the attic, deciding what to keep and what to burn. I found Ryan's high school trophies, a family photo from Christmas '98, and a letter Mom wrote me when I first left for college. In it, she said, "Never confuse keeping peace with keeping quiet." I framed it and hung it above my desk. Some nights I still dreamed of the punch, the sound, the flash of pain, the smell of lilies in the church air, but it came less often now. When I woke, I didn't feel fear. I felt distance, like watching someone else's life through a fogged window. Therapy helped. So did teaching. My students didn't know the details, but they understood pain in their own ways. One afternoon, a quiet girl stayed after class. Ms. Donovan, she asked, "How do you know when to stop forgiving someone?" I thought for a long time before answering. "When forgiveness starts feeling like permission." She nodded as if something heavy had just clicked into place. That night, I wrote those words in my journal and realized they were the lesson my life had been trying to teach me all along. 2 months later, the school district invited me to co-author a program for students living with domestic violence, something practical, honest, and safe. I said yes. The work filled the empty corners in my days. In helping others, I rebuilt parts of myself I didn't know were missing. Meanwhile, my father's health declined. Diabetes, high blood pressure, years of denial catching up. When I got the call from the hospital, the nurse said he'd listed me as next of kin. My first instinct was to hang up, but something inside me, not love, not guilt, just duty, made me go. He was thinner gray, his voice weak. "Claire," he rasped, "I never wanted it to go this far." "You mean the trial?" I asked. "The truth," he said, eyes closing. "Your mother. She always said you'd be the one to end it. I just didn't think ending it would mean losing him." He coughed, shaking his head. "I didn't protect you the way I should have." The words came out in fragments, like they'd been rusting in his throat for decades. For a moment, I saw the man he might have been if he hadn't worshipped control more than compassion. "You can still do one right thing," I said softly. "Tell the truth. Even if it's late." He nodded weakly. "I already did," he whispered. "The reporters called last week. I told them your brother wasn't the only one who lied." Tears blurred my vision. "Thank you," I said quietly. He smiled faintly. "You look like your mother when you stop being afraid." That was the last thing he ever said to me. He passed 2 days later, his statement in the local paper appearing under the headline, "Father of Convicted Fraudster, Breaks Silence. My daughter was right." I didn't cry when I read it. I just felt an immense, aching calm. The cycle was broken. No more secrets. No more silence. Just the sound of truth, steady, simple, alive. Autumn arrived slowly that year, curling the edges of the leaves into copper and rust. The air in Portland turned cool and sharp, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't dread the changing seasons. The world outside my window no longer mirrored the chaos inside my chest. It was simply beautiful, still honest. My father's funeral was small. Just a handful of neighbors, 2 former employees from his construction firm, and me. No speeches, no hymns, no photographs of Ryan on the table. I didn't bring lilies. I brought rosemary because it meant remembrance, and because Mom used to say, "Real love smells like things that grow back." I placed the sprig beside the urn and whispered, "Rest now. We're done fighting." I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. When I walked away from the cemetery that afternoon, the sky broke open with a fine, cold drizzle. I didn't run. I let it wash over me, rinsing off years of guilt that had clung to my skin like smoke. Back home, I opened the windows and let the smell of rain flood the house. The rooms that once felt haunted now breathed. I packed away the trial folders, the photos, the letters. Not to forget, but to finish. I labeled the final box. Truth sealed it and slid it under my bed. It didn't need to be seen anymore. It just needed to exist. Life found rhythm again. My garden flourished. My students thrived. I published an essay online about survival, not revenge, not forgiveness, but what comes after. I titled it, "When Silence Finally Breaks." Within a week, women from across the country emailed me stories of their own sisters, mothers, daughters, all writing versions of the same wound. One line came up again and again. "Your story made me realize I'm not crazy." Reading those messages felt like hearing 1,000 versions of my own heartbeat echoing back. I spent nights replying to each one softly, deliberately, the way I wished someone had spoken to me years ago. Then one quiet Thursday morning, a letter arrived without a return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, cramped, and careful. "Claire," it started, "I don't expect forgiveness. Jail gives you a lot of time to listen to the things you tried to bury. I've been working in the library here, reading more than I ever did in school. I watched Mom's video again. They played it in court archives. I saw her eyes. I finally understand what she meant. You were never against me. You were just done covering for me. I'm sorry. I don't ask for anything. I just hope you find peace, even if I never do. Ryan." My first instinct was disbelief. The second was something quieter. I folded the letter, placed it beside Mom's framed note on my desk. Never confuse keeping peace with keeping quiet. I didn't know if his apology was real or just another shape of regret, but I didn't need to decide. Some truths can stand without our judgment. A week later, the prison chaplain called to confirm that Ryan had entered a rehabilitation program, attending counseling twice a week. "He's different now," the chaplain said. "You might not believe it, but he's trying." I thanked him. I didn't promise to visit. Healing didn't have to mean reunion. Some boundaries were meant to stay sacred. That winter, I took a sabbatical from teaching and drove south through Oregon into California, following the coast where the ocean roared like something ancient and forgiving. I stayed in a small cottage near Big Sur where the sea spray coated everything in salt and morning fog. I wrote there every day, not stories about pain, but about rebuilding. About how justice isn't a single moment, but a decision you have to keep choosing over and over until it becomes part of your breathing. I wrote about my mother's laugh, my father's regret, my brother's downfall, and the quiet strength of walking away from the ruins without needing anyone to watch. When the manuscript was done, I titled it "The Cost of Silence." A small press in Seattle published it the following spring. On the day the first printed copy arrived, I opened it and pressed my hand against the page. The dedication read, "For those who learned too late that blood is not a promise." The book found its readers slowly, quietly in libraries and shelters and classrooms where people whispered their own names into its margins. One evening, I received an email from a counselor in Chicago who said she used it in her trauma recovery group. "Your story doesn't end in pain," she wrote. "It ends in dignity. That's rare." That night, I sat by the window, the city lights blinking through rain, and realized she was right. My life wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a testimony. The last time I visited Mom's grave spring had returned again. The rosemary I'd planted had doubled in size, thick and fragrant. Someone I didn't know who had left a folded note tucked beneath one of the stones. It said simply, "Thank you for telling the truth." I smiled. Maybe it was from a stranger. Maybe not. It didn't matter. I laid my palm on the earth, feeling warmth beneath my fingers. "We did it," I whispered. "It's over." As I walked back toward the parking lot, the air was golden with evening light, the kind that blurs every hard edge. I thought about Mom's voice, about Keller's steady encouragement, about Alan's quiet strength, and even about Ryan's final letter. Every sound and shadow of my past had built me into something solid. Peace, I realized, doesn't arrive with trumpets or apologies. It comes softly in the moment you no longer flinch at your own reflection. When I drove home that night, the horizon was burning with sunset clouds split open like the sky was exhaling. I rolled down the window, let the wind pull through my hair, and said out loud, not to anyone, but to myself, "This is freedom." And for once, I believed it.